Hi, this is Dave Cabellis. Today I'm going to talk a bit about dynamic clusters, a new feature in WebLogic 12.1.2. I will show you how dynamic clusters make it easy to roll out a new cluster and then scale up that cluster. In other words, dynamic clusters enable simplicity and elasticity for WebLogic clusters. I'll also talk about the underlying infrastructure that enables dynamic clusters. As more and more people are adopting cloud environments, we're hearing some common challenges. We hear customers ask, how do I deliver a high quality of service in those environments? How do I provide high availability and elasticity in a cloud environment? We hear customers say, what about operations at scale and management efficiencies? How do I do this successfully? And we hear customers ask, how do I make developers more productive with these environments? These challenges, the questions that customers are asking us, are what drove the underlying themes of the WebLogic Server 12.1.2 release. Those themes are mission-critical cloud platform. We strive to provide the best platform for your cloud infrastructure. Native cloud management. We're building management capabilities and efficiencies into the infrastructure layer of your cloud platform. And modern development platform. We're adding features that enable latest application architectures, and we're providing the tooling around applications to make it easy for developers to deliver next-gen applications. I'm going to focus on the first theme, Mission Critical Cloud Platform. People are thinking about and creating new style applications, mobile applications, highly elastic environments, high performance applications. We expect customers to derive a lot of value out of these investments that we're making in this area. Specifically, we're investing in database integration for high availability, multi-tenancy, and scalability. We're investing in our engineered systems for performance and manageability. But today I'm going to talk about simplicity and elasticity of clusters in WebLogic Server in the application platform itself. Dynamic clusters offer simplicity and elasticity for your WebLogic environment. They make it really easy to configure a new cluster. You no longer have to individually configure managed servers. Instead, you configure a cluster with the number of servers you want, and you configure the server template, which serves as the basis for all managed servers in the cluster. From there, the system dynamically maps out managed servers with attributes inherited from the server template and calculated where necessary. Dynamic clusters also make it easy to scale up a cluster. You can simply increase the number of dynamic servers in the cluster. WebLogic maps out the new managed servers on the fly. By making it really easy to roll out and scale out a cluster, dynamic clusters can be a building block for elasticity in a cloud environment. The WebLogic administration console captures the steps needed to configure a dynamic cluster in a series of wizard pages. I will show that to you in a few minutes. The administration console also makes it easy to manage, monitor, reconfigure a dynamic cluster once you have it up and running. Under the covers, there are a few changes to MBeans that make all of this work and that make all of this available through the administration console, through WebLogic scripting tool, and through JMX. The cluster configuration MBean now has a new child MBean called Dynamic Servers. The Dynamic Servers MBean stores attributes that define the behavior for the dynamic managed servers in the cluster, including the managed server name prefix, listen port calculations, machine mappings, the number of dynamic servers to create, and a link to a server template. More on server templates in a moment. The number of dynamic servers drives the system to create a number of server lifecycle runtime MBeans. Each of those defines or reserves server names and ports for the managed servers, defines machine mappings, and also these lifecycle runtime MBeans enable starting and stopping of servers through Node Manager or through start scripts. In essence, the server lifecycle runtime MBeans give the system something to work with in place of hand-configured managed servers. I want to briefly mention some server template details. The key ingredient of dynamic clusters is the server template, which holds server configuration for each of the managed servers in the dynamic cluster. The server template is where you can get very detailed and specific for server configuration. All managed server configuration attributes are available through the server template. And we have expansion tokens that you can use to tailor individual server startup and configuration attributes. For example, if you need to use the server name in a log file path, you can use the $server name token in the path in the server template. When the server is started and the configuration is interpreted, the token is replaced with the server name. For edge cases where a specific property is needed at runtime, you can use a startup property when you start the server, a -d flag, and use that startup property in a custom token. Just a few more details about the calculated values for managed servers in a dynamic cluster. Managed server names are derived from the server name prefix in the dynamic server's MBean, which is then appended with the server ID. A server ID is simply an integer that represents the numerical order in which the server was defined. For example, the first server would be the server name prefix appended with 1. The second would be the server name prefix appended with 2, and so forth. For network ports, you can either derive them and have them be the same across all managed servers in the cluster, or you can automatically increment them. The automatic listen port calculation is enabled by the calculated listen ports attribute on the dynamic server's MBean. Ports start with either the default value or the value defined on the server template, and then they are incremented by 1 for each managed server. Calculated ports applies to listen ports, SSL listen ports, network access points, and session replication ports. Lastly, machine mappings is the automatic association between a dynamic managed server and a machine defined in the domain. This is really most important when using the node manager to start and stop servers. By mapping machines, the system knows where to start each server. Calculated machine mappings is enabled by the calculated machine names attribute on the dynamic server's MBean. Behavior is further defined by the machine name match expression, which you can use to limit the dynamic cluster to certain machines in the domain. The expression can include wildcards like question mark and asterisk to represent variances in machine names. The idea is that you would need to name machines according to a pattern to make best use of this feature, and those names are really just the names within the WebLogic server domain. So now that I may have confused you by talking about the complicated aspects of dynamic clusters, let's walk through the process of creating a simple dynamic cluster. I think you'll see it's really pretty easy. Log into the administration console. First, I want to make sure that I have a machine configured. So I look here and I see I have my laptop is configured. Again, machine configurations are generally enable the admin server to talk to node manager instances to start and stop servers. I also already started the node manager. So if we take a look here, I have the admin server started and I have node manager started, listing on port 556. So we're ready to make this really rock and roll. So diving right in, let's go to clusters and we'll say, let's click new. And here, this is a new option here, dynamic cluster, and this will kick off the dynamic cluster configuration wizard. So I'm going to start with, I'll rename this just to make it a little more clear. I'm going to take the defaults here for the rest of the values. Don't need to do anything complicated here. So on this page of the dynamic cluster creation wizard, we get into some of the dynamic server properties. So for example, here's the number of dynamic servers to create in the cluster. Here's the server name prefix. Every managed server will be named with this prefix followed by the number of the server instance. And then here are some details about the server template. So in this case, we're just going to create a new server template to use with this cluster. So we'll just click next here. Here are the machine mappings options here. So you can use any machine, which is what we'll use. You could use a single machine and then pick which machine you want to run the whole cluster on. You can use the subset of machines and then use that machine match expression that I mentioned earlier. So just a bunch of different options here. We're going to go simple. Just keep it to any machine. So on this page, you can specify listen port bindings. You can automatically calculate those listen ports by starting with a particular port and then incrementing those. You can assign fixed listen ports and then assume that the listen address would be affected by the server template configuration. We're going to take the dynamic server unique listen ports, have these get incremented for each managed server. So here's a review of what we're creating here. So we're creating a new dynamic cluster. And we're also going to create a server template with some specific characteristics. So we say finish. And that's pretty much it. There's your cluster is configured. Now let's take a look. We see we have 2 servers ready to go. Like we had said earlier, we would define 2 managed servers. So if we take a look here, let this start. Just a little bit. There we have it. You can see the dynamic listen ports here. Each one has its own listen port. Now, if we want to change the number of dynamic servers, we can simply go here and say, I really want this to be 4. Let's save that. If I go back, you can see I have 2 running and 2 not running. So we can add these and start these also. Okay, those are running. Now let's take a quick look at server templates. So if I go here, I can say, here's my new template. And here are the different options. So I had mentioned earlier, if you wanted to put the, you can change some things and use expansion tokens. So if we take that, we save that. Now this is a non-dynamic attribute, so we'll have to restart for this change to take effect. Now we can change this, make this 250 kilobytes, and now this will automatically, all servers that derive from this server template will have this file rotation size set right now. Right, all of anything that's derived from this template will immediately get whatever we change on here as far as dynamic attributes go. Okay, so now you can see how easy it is to roll out a dynamic cluster. You can see how easy it is to scale up a dynamic cluster. If you want to learn more, you can download and install WebLogic Server 12.1.2 and try out dynamic clusters. You can also check out the other resources on this page. We have a YouTube video, a blog, and several different documentation sources with more details. You can also get involved in the WebLogic community through Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and other pathways listed here. We look forward to hearing from you, and thank you for watching my video.